And we're going to start with you, if that's all right. Um, First question we have is, what are the urgent needs, situations, and circumstances in our city facing teens, including food insecurity?
So, and I sound like everybody can hear me. I'm thinking about eating ice cream right now after my mic lesson. But the thing that I think is important to understand here in our community, and we're not unlike many communities around the country, but just under 50% of our families are living in poverty based on Department of Education data. And that in and of itself can create challenges. Many of the youth in those families are struggling with food insecurity, especially during the period when they're not in school, so during weekends, breaks, and during the summer. We also have many students that are unhoused and or living in unstable housing. And I was told we have about 63 students that are living in, that are unhoused basically, or living in unstable housing with parents. And we have 9 students currently that, and this is the piece that breaks my heart, right, that are unhoused or living in unstable housing and do not have a parent or guardian. So truly alone in our community. And so those are some of the immediate kind of situations, and access to food is big. Having adult, reliable role models is missing for some of our children and youth. And a lot of this ties back to what is called 40 developmental assets, some of you might have heard about, but kids are missing, again, in our community and many other communities, some of the basic foundational supports that allow them to be risk adverse, to be able to survive and kind of bounce back from risk. And those are concerning if they're not addressed, and those are some of the big things that come to mind.
Okay. And is your like familiarity and kind of work with this, is that related to what you're doing on city council, or is that part of like what you're working on through other organizations?
Yeah, no, thank you for asking. So I will say that, and this will sound like a politician, but it's not meant to be. Everything that I do as a city councilor is in thinking with what will make our community better for our youth. I firmly believe they're the future of our community. I want to make it a better place for them, right? And a place that youth will return to in their later years to have their children. But a lot of my work and experience has been prior to being on the city council as a member of the Sanford Backpack Program, which is an initiative that helps fight food insecurity, as well as other programs through Strategies for a Stronger Sanford that focuses on youth here in Sanford.
Okay. And can you, if there's even an answer to this, can you tell us a little like how we kind of got here, or what are some of the major contributing factors that are creating these challenges specifically?
And I think that's a hard answer, of course, but we do here in our community have generational poverty. And so, we see in our work with food insecurity in the Backpack Program, and also work I've done with parent engagement in our schools, and in just talking to my kids' friends and family members, and also being a longtime resident here of Sanford. We have families that have just, unfortunately, for whatever myriad of different reasons, lived in poverty for generations. And that, of course, contributes to food insecurity and unstable housing. We've obviously seen an increase, and Shannon might speak to this, but mental health issues have only been increasing over time. It doesn't seem like it's been getting better, especially with the pandemic. I think that as a community, there has been some, I think kids have become disengaged a little bit from each other. I think that, I don't know if I say back in the day, but, we had neighborhoods, and kids would, I might go to my friend's house down the street for dinner, and I'd connect with other adults if my household wasn't a good place to be at that point in time. But I think that's less accessible to kids now. They're more staying in their homes. They're on electronic devices. They're not running around the neighborhoods, connecting with other adults. And I don't know if that's part of contributing to some of the mental health and lack of good adult interaction.
Yeah. Wow. Yeah, you mentioned the backpack, the Stanford Backpack Program. Can you tell us a little bit about like kind of how that works? And when you talk about food insecurity, are we talking about a problem for which there's currently no solution? Like, is it that there's not enough resources that are available, or is it more that people are unaware of the resources, or people are unwilling to take advantage of the resources? Is it all of that?
So food insecurity in general, right, is the concept of not knowing where your next meal will come from. And so for some students, especially students who might be living not with their primary parent, with other guardians, or are just in tough situations, it may not be that there's zero food in their house, but they might not have access to a meal, or they might not know what that next meal is looking like. So, and there are resources out there, but when we think about youth, right, their access to resources is limited. So you have a lovely Wednesday meal, but I don't know that there may be challenges, right, to children in our community to access that meal if they don't have a supportive adult that can bring them or that will come access that meal for them. So there are barriers to access to food for youth in particular. And so what's amazing about, and why I'm so passionate about the backpack program, is that that program goes to kids. So we operate out of the school buildings. It was started by a lovely woman named Ann Garnsey, and from there we grew it to be district-wide. We send just under 200 food-filled backpacks home with kiddos on a Friday. We try to be kind of incognito, right, because there is shame around having food insecurity, and so we try to make it really, they're literally just in backpacks or bags, so they're trying to be incognito. And those backpacks have meals for the weekend for 1 to 2 people, essentially. We also provide at the high school and middle school level food markets. So again, we're at the schools where kids are. We distribute fresh produce at the end of the school day so they can grab food, head on the bus or with a ride or walking home. So we're trying to be where they are. And next year we are working on, if things go well, a more formal market at our high school that literally looks like a little convenience store that'll be set up where our older high school students have access to food and the ability to make choice. So a lot of what our program tries to do is provide quality access to food and also give students choice, and also not have it be only for a certain group of kids. So the program's open to anybody. My kiddos will grab something from the backpack program. I encourage my friends and neighbors' kiddos to do the same, because the more everybody is using some of the program, the kiddos that really truly need it desperately are more apt to access it and have less barriers in that sense.
It doesn't feel so weird for them.
Absolutely,
It's like,
right.
oh, everybody's kind of.
Yeah. No, we have athletes and our theater kids grabbing snacks after school on our market days, bringing it, and then we have kiddos that are really looking for, what can my grandma cook for dinner tonight? Grab food, and just makes it normal and okay for all the kiddos to come to the table.
Okay. And when you say meals, like on a Friday when they get meals in the backpack, like, are these prepared meals? And if so, like how are they getting prepared? And
So we try to make them as kiddo friendly as possible. So we do provide microwavable items,
Okay.
and quick, pop the top, throw it in the microwave kind of food. A typical backpack has 2 breakfast items, so oftentimes oatmeal is a good example. Usually there's a macaroni and cheese because most kids are fans of that. We also provide snacks, granola bars and some dried fruit, canned fruit. We try to send home protein like tuna or something like a shelf stable. The backpacks are shelf stable, but then the markets for the middle school and high school kids have produce as well as frozen items.
okay. And who's we?
So
So
this-
the Sanford Backpack Program,
Yeah.
right? There's people that are behind that.
Yeah.
That I assume are, there's a team of people, there's volunteers. Can you give us an idea of like the scope of that team and whether or not they're looking for help, additional resources, anything like that?
Yeah, so the Sanford Backpack Program is really lucky to have 2 amazing staff members, Amy and Lori. And in addition to that, we have a really great cadre of volunteers that help pack bags, help move pounds and pounds of food. We distributed 275,000 pounds of food last school year.
Wow.
So you get a lot of exercise volunteering for the backpack program. And when I say we, what's really amazing about this program is that it's a true partnership between community members that are volunteering, putting time in, local businesses and organizations that are making financial donations, and our school department that we just couldn't function without that partnership. We're literally in their buildings using some of their precious space, and also connecting with them about needs of their students because they have that data, not us.
Right.
And there are opportunities to volunteer. Some people like to be behind the scenes stocking shelves, and there's opportunities for that. There's also opportunities to get involved with next year's market at the high school. And this summer, if you want to do some volunteering where there's some nice weather, we'll actually be doing community distributions at 2 locations in town on Thursdays. So lots of opportunity to get out and help.
Okay, great. And anything else you want to share outside of, those opportunities, anything that, just practical ways, community of people that are wanting to be part of the solution? How can we help? Like, what is the call?
I know. First, I will say, and I think this group of folks here, I understand, often volunteer and do a lot in our community. So finding something you're passionate about doing is always key to me in terms of helping, right? So you have to find something you're passionate about and put that kind of to service for whatever the mission might be. For the backpack program, Good Shepherd Food Bank is our primary food source. We pay about 11.5 cents per pound. I'm a numbers person for anybody who really knows me. But we pay just under 12 cents a pound for our food. And so when people ask me about supporting food banks, Good Shepherd Food Bank is my number one go-to because of the fact that we partner with them. And as you know, when you grocery shop, you can't buy anything for 12 cents a pound. And that partnership is really amazing. And then I did want to just mention on the youth housing, there's an amazing organization that just started this past year. It's kind of a grassroots organization called I have to look at the name, the Sanford Community Youth Alliance. They couldn't decide on their name for a little while. And they are actively working with the school department. They're part of Strategies for Stronger Sanford, which the backpack program also is, to come up with host families to help some of the children that are unhoused in our community, but by providing housing and keeping them in the school district. Oftentimes, our unhoused youth that don't have guardians leave our school district. And the backpack program partners with that organization to be a food resource for those kiddos that are couch surfing or have unstable housing. So there's a lot of volunteer opportunities with that fledgling organization that I'd be happy to chat with people after about.
Okay, and that's obviously running, like when you're talking about unhoused, what's the age range for the youth?
Yeah,
Is
so
it like later teens?
Yeah, so we're primarily, and Shannon might even have information on this, but 8th grade to 12th grade, and even into post 12th grade, we have some kiddos that we're still connected that are 18, 19, but yeah, it's in that range.
All right. Well, thank you so much. Like I said, we'll have opportunity for some questions and answers. If you have any questions, you want to write them down so you don't forget them. But thank you, Ann. All right, Robin.
Yes.
How are you?
I'm great. How are you?
I'm doing just fine, thank you. Can you talk to us a little bit about some of the challenges or situations that our seniors are facing in our city here?
So I guess my little disclaimer here is I am not necessarily an expert on all the seniors and older adults. I'll call them older adults because that's what I do, all the older adults here in Sanford, but I can kind of talk a little bit about what I see coming into the Trafton Center and with some of the other work that I do within the community, which is our Thriving in Place work. And our older adults are as diverse a community as the community of Sanford. Some of them live in poverty, some of them don't. What they need in their 60s and 70s changes as they get to their 80s and 90s. And we do see people that come into the Trafton well into their 90s, which is really amazing and humbling and really cool. Our older adults, many of them also struggle with food insecurity. A lot of what Ann talked about with the youth, our older adults are also facing. So food insecurity, the rising cost of housing, and the inability to find housing when they want to downsize. We're very fortunate to have some older adult housing in Sanford through Sanford Housing, but there isn't enough of it. So finding an apartment that's affordable when people leave their homes is really difficult, and sometimes people are forced to move out of the community. The rising cost of food and medication and healthcare has been a real issue for a lot of our older adults. Transportation is huge. We're really lucky that we have the Sanford Transit in this community, but if you're not on the Sanford Transit line, if you're just off of it, you can't get to Hannaford, you can't get to CVS or Walgreens, and selfishly, you can't get to the Trafton Center, which we're working on. To me, I think what older adults in our community really, it comes down to connectedness. So they need to connect, to be able to connect to resources. They need to connect to not just resources to help them in their home, but to resources like the transportation and shopping and things like that. But they also need to be able to connect with each other. So isolation is really a huge issue for many, many older adults. And that's why they come to Trafton, we hope. That's, I think, what we do best is really help people connect and be socially connected and engaged with not just their friends, but their community.
Okay. Would you say that a common thread among most of the people that are coming to the Trafton Center, do they not have family that are like in the area that they're not already connected to? And you know, is it largely a very isolated person kind of situation?
Yeah, so it's kind of a mix. We have some families, some older adults that are members that have been here since, I would say, the dawn of time. Their families have been here since Sanford became Sanford, and they're very proud of that heritage. But we also have seen in recent years an influx of older adults retiring to Sanford,
Really?
which is kind of interesting, especially, I think, during the pandemic. Recently, we've seen people coming in that have moved here from other parts of the country, from Massachusetts. They may have vacationed up here. They may have spent a weekend here and decided this is where they wanted to live. Sanford housing, if you're leaving one community, you're able to actually still buy a house with your proceeds from your house sale in another community. It's somewhat affordable. I have a daughter who's trying to buy a home. She would disagree with me. So some are connected to families, and then some are not. We have older members who are starting to outlive their friends. They're starting to outlive their family members. So as they're aging in where they are, they're also becoming more isolated, and that is difficult.
Yeah. Is there, it's interesting, I mean, I never really thought about this too much, but I mean, we live on a street here in Sanford that's, I don't know, maybe has 10 houses, 12 houses on it at the most. And like the people across the street, we're at the end, people across the street and the people directly to my left, like they did that. They're older couples. One came from Connecticut. I still don't know why. Like landed in Sanford, just chose Sanford. And same thing with the folks across the street. Is there a particular reason why it's become a bit of a destination for some people? And
Well, I think that I like to think that it's part of what Sanford offers. So Sanford's a nice community.
Sure.
And it's not far from things. So it has a healthcare hub. It's not far to lakes and that kind of recreation. It's not far from the beach. It's not horribly far from Portland. And again, I think that home prices are still affordable for most people. If you sell a house for a decent amount of money in Massachusetts or Connecticut and purchase a home in Sanford, you still have probably a nice little nest egg, something to live on to support you during your retirement.
right, okay. And so what is the experience for somebody that comes into the Trafton Center? Like what is it, a day in the life of,
Day in the life of the Trafton, well,
of
yes,
a
it
Trafton
depends
Center member?
what day you come in. And we have lots of different activities. So like today we started with yoga and had a nice group of people came in to stretch and move and connect that way. And then we had cards this afternoon and couple of different card groups this afternoon.
What kind of card groups?
Well, we have today was scat and whist. I have to stop and think what day it is. I'm having trouble with the whole Monday holiday piece because anyway, Monday, Tuesdays are hard. But today, so we also have, scat, I don't know if you know what that is.
I don't.
If you can count to 31, have some quarters you want to part with, and know the suits of your cards, you can come and play scat.
Okay.
And if you're 50 and older, you can absolutely come and play scat because that's the age at which you can actually be a member of Trafton. So,
Okay.
yeah, so.
3 more years, people. 3 more years. I'm there. Especially if you have cribbage or spades for money. I mean,
right, Right. The scat people, they will take your money.
Okay,
So,
yeah.
We have a Friday lunch that we charge a little bit of money to cover the cost of our food, but it really is just a time for people to be able to have some kind of affordable food and come in and just chat with one another over a meal. We have people come in, we had a coffee group come in, they come in for a cup of coffee. We have, I don't want to say the cheapest because that makes it sound like it's not good. We have probably the least expensive cup of coffee in the city of Sanford at 75 cents. Again, just covering the cost of what it is because we want to encourage people to come in and connect. We also do a lot of resource sharing. So if we don't have what people want, we try to connect people with what else they want. So line dancing, pickleball, we don't do that, but we can tell you who does.
Right. So all right, so you have people that are coming into the center. What about people that are like truly isolated and like is there outreach as well to say somebody that's a shut-in that like it's really, really hard for them to leave their house or they just don't want to?
Well, and so obviously not everybody comes into the Trafton even if they're not isolated, because some people just are not joiners, right? So they are sort of just predisposed to be isolated. And those are harder people to reach, honestly, and we do our best, and I know there are other organizations in the community that do their best to reach them. But it's hard. I mean, I think that's where we as members of communities need to start being aware of who our neighbors are.
Right.
Because we're the ones that are going to connect with them. It may not be an organization that connects, it might be us.
Yeah. As individuals.
As individuals.
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
Like, I mean,
yeah, like you're going to go meet your
my
neighbors
neighbors
from
right
Connecticut.
now
Yeah.
might be doing just fine on their own, but
Right.
you know, who knows 5 years from now when they
Right.
start to need some more help. We need to notice that.
Right, and I guess some of the ways to do that are, I think when you drive around town, you can see the people's grass starts to get, even outside of No Mow May, it's a little hard right now, but June 1st, look around and see whose grass is high. Those are people that are probably alone and isolated and don't have anybody to help them.
Okay.
It might be a couple, so they might have somebody to chat with, but they're still somehow alone. If you see sidewalks and driveways not shoveled, those are people that are probably alone. Mail piling up outside someone's mailbox is really huge, because that probably means not only they are alone, but they might also be in some kind of distress. So those are the people to keep our eyes out for, I think.
Okay. All right. Anything else that you want to share?
I guess the other thing I want to say about those people with the grass unknown, they're also become targets for people. So, and Shannon could probably talk to that a lot, but they become targets for people who are going to prey on them and knock on their door and offer to fix something to mow their lawn as a way to get in. So it's also important just to know the resources in your community, and if you don't know, then to find places. So, you can call us at the Trafton Center, you can call York County Community Action. There are organizations in this community to call to find the resources to help people.
Okay, great. Thank you so much. All right, Shannon, you've come here before and shared with a small group of people a little bit about the unhoused population here in Sanford, and a little bit about the scope of, kind of what that looks like. Can you first of all just tell us, like, what is driving you to be such a big part of an advocate for, these neighbors of ours?
So just a disclaimer, I am not a great public speaker. This makes me very nervous, so bear
That's
with
why
me.
There's nobody even out there.
Yeah, I know. I can't even see anyone.
Yeah, it's
I
just
know
us.
they're there.
We're just having a casual conversation here.
Yeah, going all the police calls, but this,
That's right.
you know.
Yeah. Would you feel better with a vest on, like?
Probably.
Okay. all
I
right.
have a vest. It says clinician on it. It's awesome.
Nice.
Anyways, so what drives me? So I started working in mental health crisis work years ago, and just really fell in love with helping people in the moment. So when they're, going through something distressing, in that moment, being somebody there to kind of help. And that's kind of what drives me in general, doing this type of work. I think that we have a really vulnerable population of people, especially our unhoused people in Sanford, and just being somebody that they can kind of rely on or talk to or, reach out to if needed, it's, really rewarding.
How did that start? I imagine for a lot of people, like the idea of engaging in a conversation with, a complete stranger might be scary enough. Never mind somebody that you like is clearly, somebody that didn't sleep in a home last night and may or may not have mental illness challenges, things like that. I mean, how did this all kind of start for you?
Again, so I mean, I just started working in crisis. I don't know, I guess it's easy for me on a small scale to start connecting with people. I want to know people's stories. I find it really interesting, getting to know different people, where they've been. Yeah, and I think it's just, some people are good at that and some are, it's not their thing. So I think it's kind of one of my, I just enjoy it. I go to work every day enjoying what I'm doing, so.
That's great. Can you tell us a little bit about the situation itself when it comes to the unhoused population? Is it getting better, getting worse? Is it kind of staying the same?
So right now we just did a numbers. So we keep track at the police department of the unhoused that we encounter. And so our numbers are going up. There's all different reasons for that. So like with poverty, right? So you're like one paycheck away from losing housing when you're struggling with money. Or we have the increased rent prices. We're pricing out our community. That's really what's happening. So we're increasing, like I tell people an example, one of our police officers who works in the unit with me, her landlord increased rent by almost half and literally priced her out of her apartment.
Wow.
It's, and it's happening everywhere. So, a bad situation, sometimes it's, one of their kids is struggling, so they've been out of work for a little bit, taking time off, and then they're falling behind with rent. And then there's the typical, mental illness and substance use that kind of leads down into like chronic homelessness. So there's all different reasons, but I think our increases really happened, or we saw the increases during COVID. Lots of people stopped having to pay their rent during COVID, right? And then when all of that ended, the landlords still wanted that rent money, but they wanted that lump sum. And so there was mass evictions. And then on top of that, we had rental assistance, emergency assistance through COVID, so which was putting people in hotel rooms. And then they canceled that recently too. So that funding is gone. There is no more emergency rental assistance. So we're just seeing more people on the streets, and there's nowhere for them, really to go. We do not have many shelters. We need low barrier shelters. We have one in York County. And they do a great job, but it's, there's just not enough. It's the same thing in Portland. We're all seeing it on the news with the tent cities and all of that. So, yeah, we need more,
Can you explain for everybody here what you mean by low barrier shelter as opposed to like the shelter that probably people are familiar with in Alfred, which is not a low barrier
it's
shelter.
It's not, no. So in Alfred, their shelter is a program that you have to call, and you have to do an intake appointment, and you can get you would get a room, and then you get to stay there with services. It's a really great program for some people, but you have to be sober. You have to not have any history of violence or recent criminal activity. You can't have conditions of release or probation. So it just, our homeless population, that's what we're seeing more people with active substance use, severe mental illness, so they are, not regulated on medications, not seeing doctors, having active hallucinations or delusions, and not wanting to go to the doctors, and we can't make them. So, yeah, difficult behaviors we see. So that shelter doesn't take anybody like that. And then, so those are the people that we see on the side of the road, or sleeping next to the river, or, under the tunnel at the mills. And they're just, so a low barrier shelter is a shelter like they used to have, well, they still have it, I guess, in Portland, Oxford Street Shelter, and they had their day shelter, Preble Street. So that shelter, anybody can go there. It's not low barrier. I mean, it is low barrier. So anyone, if you're having mental health issues, you have history of criminal activity, anybody can go. You go, you check in. Every night there's like a line of people. You line up. If you get in, you get in, and then that's it. You know, you leave in the morning, go and hang out at the day shelter, and it's just it allows for anybody to be there.
I don't know if this is a question for you or maybe back to Anne, but when we had when everything originally started with the families that are seeking asylum, when that was all coming to the surface, there was sort of this, I don't know, a pretty negative response on the part of a lot of people, thinking it's like, oh my goodness, the city is like helping, you know, these people that have just descended into our town here, and meanwhile we have all these other people that are just being ignored. Can you, one of you, speak to that a little bit, because that's not exactly, I don't think, the picture of what was happening.
It's not exactly what happened, but I do want to say that it's understandable why some of our chronically homeless residents would think that. So asylum seekers are a totally different class of funding. It is, it's just a totally separate thing. And the other big difference is when we're putting an asylum-seeking family in a hotel, they are not people that have been kicked out of hotels a bunch of times for behaviors or mental health issues or active use, leaving syringes everywhere, whatever. They are families, right? So a lot of times our chronically homeless are not allowed in the hotels that we have in Sanford, Springvale. Not always, but sometimes. So the other issue that I think caused some stress between the communities was that when all the asylum seeker families came in, they kind of took over the general assistance lines, right? So our people who were residents who are homeless and have appointments for general assistance kind of got pushed to the back of the line waiting for their funding, while our awesome general assistance man took care of the asylum seekers because it was more of an emergency situation. And so I think that the hotel rooms got filled up quick, and so people felt like, you know, we're not taking care of our residents here. It's a completely separate type of funding. General assistance is the same for any, but in general, the whole program is totally different. And there's a lot of different factors at play, you know, that influence, them getting hotel rooms compared to some of our other more chronic. Do you want to say anything to me, Anne?
If I could just add that at the same time frame, and this is kind of a shout out to our general assistance office, which is literally 1.5 people, an administrative assistant that's amazing, but that came in just during this time frame. But at the same time that we were helping 20 plus families through the general assistance process that were from not from our community initially, we also were helping and serving our typical Sanford families. And they weren't necessarily the unhoused folks that Shannon's helping, but families with kiddos that had run into tough times and needed general assistance for a place to stay because of evictions or other issues, but didn't have some of the issues that the folks Shannon sees in the mental health unit. So, but we don't talk about that. You know, we're not going to go out and say, well, at the same time we served X of these folks, we served Y of these folks. Our general assistance office serves anybody that needs assistance.
Yeah.
And so they were doing that, but you just didn't see those families.
Right. And in that moment of crisis, too, my understanding is like there were people from other departments in City Hall, just like everybody was like really rallying to the try to help, right?
Yeah.
I mean, like to do what they could. And despite the fact that it was overrun, they're working
crazy.
late hours, and
Yeah. Shout out to Randy.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
General assistance, he's awesome.
So as far as the unhoused population is concerned, I mean, the solution's simple. All they have to do is get a job, right? Get a job, that's it, right?
Yes. Yeah, wouldn't
No,
it be so easy?
is it more complicated than that?
It's a little more complicated
Okay,
than
how
that,
so?
Yeah. So, I mean, there's just so many barriers that these people face. A lot of the Folks are maybe not necessarily from Maine originally. They don't have a license or birth certificate or any form of ID, can't get a job without that. When we try to get their birth certificate that they lost along the way, we run into issues trying to get them out of state. I tried for 3 months to get a lady's birth certificate. Eventually, we can't get it, so she can't apply for Sanford housing because she doesn't have an ID. Wow. She can't apply for Maine Care. She can't apply for food stamps. None of that. Without an ID, without a birth certificate, you cannot do so. Other things, access to showers. So what employer is going to want to hire somebody that comes in for an interview smelling not so great, or not having the best clothing to wear? And then chronic mental health and not having enough services in the community to support these people. I'm trying to think how to say this. To have appropriate behaviors in the community and to do a job interview and have the support that they need to be able to maintain. We don't have enough of anything right now. Wait lists are months and months long for any type of service. If you want a therapist for a kid or an adult, it's 6+ months wait list. Case management is the same, sometimes worse. Psychiatry is worse. Medication management is even worse. So and then everybody says go to the hospital, go inpatient, but that is really difficult too. Our ERs are overrun. They don't keep half of the people we bring over there because they just don't have the capacity to do so. And so again, a lot of people who are chronically mentally ill don't get the treatment that they need. And then it just kind of perpetuates this issue. So there's just tons of barriers to why they can't get jobs or maintain jobs. But truthfully, a lot of them do want to work. So if we had the systems in place to help them get jobs, they would love to. One of the biggest things that we need now is access to showers. That would be just a huge, huge help for the whole community. Access to bathrooms and access to showers. Simple things.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Is any advice that you would give to the average person for how they might engage or interact with somebody that's part of this community? Is that even recommended, or like?
They're just people.
Yeah.
They've maybe had different life circumstances than you, but they're people. They're not scary. Most of them aren't violent. They're not, and they appreciate being treated like a human being. So I think if you act afraid of them, they might show you why you could be.
Okay.
You know what I mean? Because it's just kind of nature to be angry with someone if they're acting afraid of you for no reason, right? But just say hi. How are you doing today? Just engage. They are lovely people. Most of them are lovely. I haven't met any that I haven't enjoyed talking to. So they're good people that just have had totally different life circumstances. Yeah.
Well, thank you very much.
Yep. All
right, Jim. So here it says you are the community volunteer coordinator.
True.
All right. Can you give us an update on what you know about the asylum seekers in Sanford? Is anything that you can kind of catch us up on?
Yeah, sure. So I do have some very basic numbers here. Currently, we have this is pretty settled out, but it does fluctuate. We have 26 families, and that is made up of 41 adults and 42 children. So you can see just by those numbers that it is families. It's a lot of families that are here. So most of them are up at the Sanford Inn, right up the road from here. And they've been here for what? We're close to 4 weeks now, right? Something like that. But they're, I think that they're kind of settling in. I say settling in, that's very relative to just where they've been and where they've come from in their journey. But yeah, they're making their way around the community, the volunteer efforts, getting them to the grocery stores, getting them the food they need. Everything's been pretty good. Oh, I should share as well that there are a few families that are expecting newborns, and since this all started, we've had 2 births. So
Wow.
the numbers are fluctuating in different ways.
For multiple reasons, yeah. Wow, that's pretty exciting. I imagine a little crazy, but yeah. Any ideas about, how we can continue to serve, the people of this community? Are there just, some practical ways, people that want to volunteer? I know we, immediately were trying to assemble, interest for volunteering even before we knew what that might look like. Like, we have no idea what needs might come up, and, we sort of had this position of, taking our cues from the city and from the other experts that were, trying to guide the whole community in the best way, to help these folks long term. So somebody's really interested in, participating in helping there, what are the opportunities that might be available?
Yeah, sure. So there are a ton of different opportunities. That being said, they aren't consistently all available at all hours of the day or whenever it might be most convenient for somebody. But as part of my responsibilities as the community volunteer coordinator, I meet with other community leaders and York County Community Action Corporation, and I work with other team leads. And so my primary role in all of that is to be the singular point of contact for anybody in the community, and we're here in the church, for any volunteer opportunity or any sort of interest in a specific area of volunteering. And what I do is I will get that person the contact information and explain what's going on in that team, and kind of make sure that's what they want to do, and get them linked up so they can talk with those team leads. We've got team leads for food with Jen with Nasson. She's been great, Jen Davey. We've got Marie Briggs with Beloved, who's been heading up the efforts for clothing. And I should note as well, clothing's a great example of one of those. It seems like one of those, oh yeah, I've got like bags of clothes, or I've got all this extra stuff, like I can go take that up there to them. And that's an area where that can actually get people into trouble, because they end up with just too much stuff, or stuff they don't need, and then it's filling up the dumpster, or it's sitting outside, and then that causes potential issues with the hotel owner and that sort of thing. And it's also just overwhelming for them as well. But yeah, so anyways, there are plenty of volunteer opportunities. It's just a matter of coordinating, doing those things at the right time, and doing them in an organized way.
Right, which is an important reason why somebody wants to get involved, not think that this is just a thing that they can do as a maverick member of the community.
That's
I'm
right.
just going to jump in there and do what I think is best. They really should try to work with the organizations that are already implementing strategies for how to help them long term the best way possible.
Yes, that's correct. Even from just a standpoint from volunteer efforts, how it affects the volunteer teams, because if the left hand doesn't know what the right hand is doing, we've got a duplicity of efforts and a redundancy that just isn't necessary. People see, well, what was I doing, and well, I'm not gonna spend my Saturday afternoon next time if I'm not needed. So there's volunteer burnout that has to be considered as well.
Yeah. Great. All right. My understanding is that one of the critical timing elements, there's 5 weeks of assistance that was available, right? That's available to anybody. And then I remember at the meeting, we talked about, it's like, okay, well, after that, then it's like, maybe we can stretch that out a little bit more. If we're at the 3-4 week sort of area, what's about to happen, in the next week or two?
Yeah, that's a great question. So I'm not.
Is that a question you want Ann to answer?
If Ann wants to correct me.
Okay, all right, we'll give you the first crack at it.
That's right. And I'll preface this as well as I'm not an expert on general assistance or anything like that. I'm learning all this at light speed. But from what I understand, the emergency funding that they received, which is what they've been using to pay for their hotel rooms, that was sort of a legacy COVID policy that was in place. And that has since gone away. That's done. We're not going back to that. The assistance that they have right now runs out on June 15th. I believe the overwhelming majority, if not all of them, have been approved for long-term general assistance, which will provide them, based on the size of their household and the size of the apartment or house that they end up in, a certain amount of money for up to 24 months, I believe. The problem is, and this goes back to like what Shannon was talking. We have a housing crisis before this all started. So as of right now, there's been a lot of discussion about, well, what will we do for this 2-week gap between June 15th and July 1st? And in exploring that, just kind of recognizing that the housing isn't there on July 1st either. So there are some efforts in the background with York County Community Action Corporation. They've got some housing navigators, and they're working really hard to find housing that very well may not be in Sanford. It may be in some of the other towns around here. But what I would encourage everybody in this room to do is just, you don't have to doom and gloom and spread the news that, oh, these people are going to be out on the streets on June 15th. But if you know somebody who has rental property that's going to be available at some point in the near future or is available now, we have people that are going to be funded for 24 months. And, I haven't met every single one of them personally, but they are all very nice people. They're very, very nice people. I imagine they'd be wonderful tenants. So if you know somebody who has a rental property, you can contact me. I can get that information to the right people. And if you just know anybody that's in that sort of business, run it by them as well. Just spread that word around, because there's a lot of assumptions that everything's just going to be okay somehow, that the money's going to come from somewhere. And, the business that Shannon's in proves that that's just not the truth.
All right. He did all right? He did? Okay. Nothing you have to correct? Not in front of everybody anyway.
Thank you.
All right.